The distribution network operated through 5 university campuses across 3 states: Penn State in Pennsylvania, Ohio State in Ohio, University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, University of Wisconsin in Madison, University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. Each campus had fraternity chapters that served as distribution hubs, moving counterfeit prescription medications and recreational drugs to student populations, totaling more than 200,000 across all 5 locations. The operation had been running for 7 months, but the scale was about to expand dramatically. Finals week was approaching at all 5 universities. The week before final examinations was the peak demand period for study drugs. Students seeking cognitive enhancement, extended focus, and ability to study for extended hours would create unprecedented market conditions. The network planned to flood campuses with supply timed precisely to that demand surge. The drugs being distributed were not what they appeared to be. Pills stamped to resemble Adderall contained methamphetamine instead of pharmaceutical amphetamine. Students who believed they were taking prescription stimulants were consuming street methamphetamine at doses that caused addiction, psychosis, and cardiovascular damage. Capsules sold as pharmaceutical-grade ketamine contained unknown research chemicals with unpredictable effects. The deception was systematic and deliberate. 17 fraternity houses across the 5 campuses served as distribution points. The houses provided perfect cover, constant social activity, high foot traffic, parties that normalized substance use. Students who needed drugs could obtain them from sources they perceived as trustworthy because they were peers. The Greek life infrastructure had been exploited to create a drug distribution network that reached thousands of students. DEA agents had been investigating the operation for 11 weeks. The case began when campus police at Penn State reported an unusual pattern of medical emergencies at fraternity houses. Students were presenting at the health center with symptoms inconsistent with reported drug use. They claimed to have taken Adderall but displayed signs of methamphetamine intoxication, including paranoia, psychosis, and cardiovascular complications. Laboratory analysis of pills seized by campus police confirmed the deception. Pills stamped with Adderall markings contained methamphetamine. The pills were manufactured with sufficient quality that visual inspection could not distinguish them from legitimate pharmaceuticals. Students had no way to know they were consuming street drugs instead of prescription medications. The investigation expanded when similar patterns emerged at the other 4 universities. Students at Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota were experiencing medical emergencies linked to counterfeit Adderall. The consistency across geographically separated campuses suggested coordinated operations rather than isolated incidents. Financial investigation revealed connections between fraternity members at all 5 universities. Wire transfers, Venmo payments, and cryptocurrency transactions linked individuals at different campuses. The financial flows suggested a centralized supply source distributing to multiple university locations through fraternity networks. Phone intercepts captured conversations about finals week preparation. Fraternity members discussed inventory levels, pricing strategies, and expected demand. They referenced study drug sales with the casualness of legitimate business planning. The language revealed they knew exactly what they were selling and understood the profit potential. The human cost was already mounting. During the 7 months the network had operated, emergency medical services at all 5 universities responded to 137 incidents involving counterfeit Adderall or contaminated ketamine. 43 students required hospitalization. 11 developed serious complications, including kidney failure, cardiac damage, and persistent psychotic symptoms. 2 died. At Penn State, a 19-year-old sophomore died in his dorm room during midterm exams. Roommates reported he had been taking Adderall to study for multiple exams scheduled within 2 days. He had purchased pills from someone at a fraternity house. Over 36 hours, he consumed what he believed was 120 milligrams of Adderall spread across multiple doses. He was actually consuming methamphetamine. His heart stopped while he was studying alone at 3 p.m. His roommate found him 6 hours later. At University of Michigan, a 20-year-old woman was hospitalized after experiencing acute psychosis. She had taken what she believed was Adderall to prepare for an organic chemistry exam. Within hours, she became paranoid and delusional, believing people were following her and trying to harm her. Friends called campus police when she locked herself in a bathroom and refused to come out. She was transported to a psychiatric facility where she remained for 12 days. Medical staff told her family that methamphetamine intoxication had triggered psychotic episode that might have lasting effects. At Ohio State, a 21-year-old student suffered a stroke after consuming counterfeit Adderall during finals preparation. He had no history of cardiovascular problems. He was an athlete on the track team. After taking pills purchased from a fraternity member, he experienced severe headache and confusion. Friends noticed he was slurring words and unable to move his right arm. They called 911 immediately. Paramedics recognized stroke symptoms and transported him to a hospital where he received emergency treatment. He survived, but the stroke caused permanent mobility impairment that ended his athletic career. At Wisconsin, paramedics responded to a fraternity house where a student had collapsed during a party. Investigation revealed he had consumed ketamine, believing it was pharmaceutical grade. The substance was contaminated with an unknown research chemical that caused severe respiratory depression and seizures. He was revived after receiving emergency medical care, but remained hospitalized for 5 days. At Minnesota, campus police responded to reports of erratic behavior at a library. A 22-year-old graduate student was found screaming about conspiracies and attempting to fight library security. She had consumed what she thought was Adderall to work on her thesis. The methamphetamine caused acute paranoid psychosis. She was involuntarily committed to psychiatric care for 72 hours. When she regained lucidity, she explained she had purchased pills from someone she knew at a fraternity party, trusting they were legitimate Adderall because the source was a fellow student. These incidents occurred during regular academic periods. Finals week would multiply the problem exponentially. The network was stockpiling inventory specifically for that demand surge. Intelligence intercepts revealed plans to distribute 38,000 counterfeit Adderall pills and 12,000 ketamine doses across the 5 campuses during the 7 days preceding final examinations. DEA analysts projected the health consequences. Based on observed complication rates from counterfeit drugs during the 7 months of network operations, the finals week distribution would likely cause between 200 and 300 medical emergencies across 5 campuses. Hospital and campus health center capacity would be overwhelmed. Students would suffer cardiovascular events, seizures, psychotic episodes, and overdoses at rates that exceeded medical response capabilities. The mortality projection was 25 to 35 deaths during finals week and the immediate aftermath. The deaths would occur across demographics. Students with no prior drug use who believed they were taking prescription medications. Regular users who consumed higher doses because final stress increased desperation. Individuals with underlying health conditions who did not know methamphetamine use would trigger catastrophic events. 25 to 35 families would receive calls from university officials or police departments. Parents who sent their children to college expecting education would instead arrange for bodies to be transported home for burial. The tragedy would devastate communities and haunt universities for years. The deaths would occur during what was supposed to be an academic milestone, turning final examinations into final weeks of life. The distribution timeline was precise. Finals week began Monday morning at all 5 universities. The schedule was synchronized across institutions, with exams occurring Monday through Friday. Peak study intensity would occur during the weekend before finals and the first 3 days of exam week. That period represented maximum demand for study drugs. The network planned to position inventory at fraternity houses by Thursday of the preceding week, 5 days before finals began. Distribution would accelerate Friday through Sunday as students prepared for Monday exams. By Monday morning, thousands of students would have consumed counterfeit drugs believing they were legitimate pharmaceuticals. DEA tactical planning focused on dismantling the network before inventory reached campus. The drugs were being manufactured at a facility in Gary, Indiana, then transported to staging locations near each university. From those staging locations, fraternity members would retrieve inventory and position it at their houses. Interdicting during the transport phase would prevent drugs from reaching campuses entirely. Intelligence analysis identified the Gary facility through precursor chemical tracking. The pill press operation was producing counterfeit Adderall at industrial scale. The facility had capacity to produce 20,000 pills per day. Equipment was sophisticated, creating pills nearly indistinguishable from legitimate pharmaceuticals. The operation demonstrated professional capabilities that went beyond typical campus drug dealing. Surveillance teams documented transport operations. Vehicles departed Gary carrying drugs to staging locations near Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. The drives occurred weekly to resupply fraternity distributors. The final transport before finals week would carry the accumulated inventory intended for the demand surge. That final transport was scheduled for Wednesday, 9 days before finals week began. The timing would allow fraternity members to retrieve inventory Thursday through Saturday, position drugs at houses Sunday through Tuesday, and begin heavy distribution Wednesday through Friday before finals. The operation was planned with precision that reflected understanding of university academic calendars and student behavior patterns. Federal prosecutors finalized warrants for the Gary manufacturing facility, staging locations near all 5 universities, and the 17 fraternity houses identified as distribution hubs. The legal documentation was extensive, detailing 11 weeks of investigation, including surveillance observations, financial analysis, phone intercepts, and laboratory reports confirming counterfeit drugs. Coordination required unprecedented cooperation across multiple jurisdictions: federal agents, state police from 3 states, campus police from 5 universities, local law enforcement from cities hosting the universities. University administrators needed briefing to prepare for operational impact on campuses. The complexity was substantial, but the timeline allowed no delays. Wednesday morning, 6 days before finals week would begin, DEA tactical teams executed coordinated raids. The Gary facility was the primary target. At 6:23 a.m., agents breached the location and secured industrial pill press equipment, precursor chemicals, finished counterfeit pills, and manufacturing records. 8 individuals were detained at the facility. Evidence seized showed production of more than 400,000 counterfeit pills over 7 months. Simultaneously, raids executed at staging locations near each university. Combined arrests at staging locations totaled 19 individuals. Seizures included 38,000 counterfeit Adderall pills prepared for finals week distribution, 12,000 ketamine capsules, cash exceeding $340,000, and distribution records documenting sales at all 5 campuses. Campus operations required coordination with university police and administrators. DEA agents executed warrants at 17 fraternity houses across 5 campuses. The timing was early Wednesday morning before students departed for classes. Fraternity members involved in distribution operations were identified and detained. Evidence seized included remaining inventory from prior shipments, sales records, customer lists, and communication devices containing coordination messages. The raids disrupted morning routines at all 17 houses. Students not involved in drug operations were interviewed and released. University administrators implemented interim measures, including temporary suspension of fraternity activities pending investigation outcomes. Campus police maintained presence to manage student concerns and prevent interference with federal operations. Total arrests across all locations: 52 individuals. 38,000 counterfeit Adderall pills seized. 12,000 ketamine capsules seized. Manufacturing equipment capable of producing 20,000 pills per day shut down. Distribution networks spanning 5 universities dismantled completely. University administrators held emergency meetings to address the situation. Campus health centers were briefed to watch for students experiencing complications from drugs obtained before the raids. Counseling services were activated to support students affected by the operation. Academic deans prepared communications for students and parents explaining the law enforcement actions. The immediate impact was visible across all 5 campuses. Students who relied on counterfeit drugs for academic performance faced finals week without their usual supplies. Some entered academic support programs to develop legitimate study strategies. Others sought prescription Adderall through proper medical channels, discovering they did not actually need stimulants and had been creating dependency based on belief rather than medical necessity. Campus health centers reported decreased presentations of stimulant-related complications during finals week. The reduction was dramatic compared to prior semesters. Students were not experiencing the cardiovascular symptoms, psychotic episodes, and severe anxiety that had characterized previous finals periods. The correlation was clear. When counterfeit methamphetamine was removed from circulation, student health improved measurably. Emergency medical services at all 5 universities documented reduced call volumes during finals week. Paramedics who had prepared for surge demand based on historical patterns found that calls remained at baseline levels. The anticipated crisis never materialized because the drugs that would have caused it were seized before reaching students. But the operation had already caused permanent damage. 2 deaths over 7 months. 11 students with serious long-term complications. Dozens of others who developed methamphetamine addiction, believing they were using prescription medications. The student at Penn State, who died alone in his dorm room studying for exams he would never take. The Michigan student who experienced psychotic episode that might affect her for life. The Ohio State athlete whose stroke ended his career. The lives altered or ended by drugs disguised as pharmaceutical help. The finals week distribution that was prevented would have multiplied that damage catastrophically. 38,000 counterfeit pills reaching students during maximum stress period. Based on observed patterns, at least 300 students would have experienced serious medical complications. 25 to 35 would likely have died. Finals week would have become a public health crisis across 5 major universities. Those complications did not occur. The deaths did not happen. The counterfeit drugs never reached campuses. Students who would have consumed methamphetamine believing it was Adderall took their finals without that exposure. The health crisis that was projected never materialized. Emergency rooms remained manageable. Campus health centers handled baseline demand. Families did not receive death notifications. The margin was 6 days. Wednesday morning when raids executed versus the following Tuesday when distribution would have accelerated. If agents had waited until Thursday, inventory would have reached fraternities. If they had waited until Friday, distribution would have begun. If they had waited until Monday, thousands of students would have consumed counterfeit drugs. The investigation revealed organizational sophistication. The Gary facility operated as professional manufacturing. The pill press equipment was high quality, producing counterfeits that required laboratory testing to identify. The distribution network exploited fraternity infrastructure systematically. Financial operations used multiple payment methods to obscure money flows. The planning demonstrated understanding of university culture, academic calendars, and student demand patterns. But 11 weeks of investigation exposed the entire operation. Campus police reports initiated the case. Laboratory analysis confirmed counterfeit drugs. Financial tracking linked operatives across universities. Surveillance documented manufacturing and transport. Phone intercepts revealed distribution coordination. Every piece contributed to comprehensive understanding that enabled simultaneous raids across multiple states. When the decision was made to execute operations, timing was precise. Wednesday morning, 6 days before finals week. Before final transport delivered inventory to staging locations. Before fraternity members positioned drugs at houses. Before students began consuming counterfeit pills they believed would help them succeed academically. The outcome was definitive. Manufacturing shut down. Transport intercepted. Staging locations cleared. Fraternity distribution points dismantled. 52 arrests. 50,000 counterfeit pills and ketamine doses seized. A network that operated successfully for 7 months was completely disrupted in single coordinated operation executed across 5 states. The investigation continues. Federal prosecutors are building cases against 52 defendants. Charges include manufacturing controlled substance analogs, distribution of counterfeit pharmaceuticals, conspiracy to distribute, and operating continuing criminal enterprise. Evidence seized provides documentation of operations spanning 7 months and generating revenue exceeding $2 million. Universities are implementing enhanced protocols. Campus police are receiving training on counterfeit drug identification. Health centers are establishing screening procedures for students requesting stimulant prescriptions. Greek life organizations are implementing educational programs about prescription drug misuse and counterfeit medications. The institutions are adapting to prevent future exploitation, but the threat persists. Other manufacturing operations exist. Different distribution networks are active. Students continue seeking cognitive enhancement through pharmaceuticals. The pressure of academic performance drives demand that criminal enterprises exploit. The problem is systemic. This network, this manufacturing facility, these 50,000 pills, these 5 campuses, these 200,000 students, these 300 projected medical emergencies, these 25 projected deaths were stopped. Wednesday morning, 6 days before finals week, before inventory reached campuses, before students consumed drugs that would harm or kill them. The timing made the difference. 200,000 students at 5 universities took their final examinations. Some succeeded, some struggled. All faced academic challenges they addressed through study, preparation, and effort. They did not know that 6 days before finals week began, federal agents raided 17 fraternity houses and seized 38,000 counterfeit pills intended for distribution. They did not know they had been days away from a public health crisis that would have overwhelmed university resources and killed dozens of their peers. The absence of tragedy is invisible. The student at Penn State who might have died studying alone in his room completed his exams and went home for break. The Michigan student who might have experienced psychosis finished her semester without crisis. The Ohio State athlete who might have suffered career-ending stroke competed in track events. The Wisconsin student who might have seized after consuming contaminated ketamine attended classes normally. The Minnesota graduate student who might have had breakdown at the library defended her thesis successfully. These alternative outcomes exist only in projection, but the evidence of what was prevented remains in case files, laboratory reports, seizure records, and the knowledge that 6 days made the difference between academic stress and catastrophe. The work continues, but for this network, for these 5 universities, for these students, the counterfeit drugs never arrived. 6 days. That was the margin.